Hello and welcome to Game Tips with GM Rick. I hope you guys are doing great. It's a Friday here for me, so I hope everything is just going beautiful, getting ready for gaming. I know I've got a gaming session this weekend, Pathfinder-wise. Sorry for my video camera that isn't better quality. Hopefully the sound will make up for what the video can't give you. So the topic today that I wanted to discuss a little bit is the use of temperature and environmental modifiers, as well as things like disease and combat states. So it can be things from like charmed, dazed, and all the other states that a lot of the systems talk about. A lot of times as GMs and DMs, we're afraid to use these because we think it's going to take away from the story and that it's too mechanics oriented to use in systems. I'm going to focus in this dive very heavily into Pathfinder and some with the D&D, because you can, with Dungeons & Dragons, you can also interpolate that over using the DM's guide and the player's handbook for that. For those of you that are using other systems like Numenera and Mutants and Masterminds, Fate, and the Cypher systems, they're going to have things like that available in your systems. Unfortunately, yet I'm not as versed in those, so I can't really do deep dives for you. But again, it's something that you can utilize as long as you understand the mechanics. So really take time to familiarize yourself as a GM with these mechanics. They're very important, I think, in my mind, when it comes to using that to help enhance an adventure and a campaign. It can be used in that portion that we call the obstacles. And you remember we talked about goals, obstacles, characters, and attempts. And that's always the format you should keep in your mind every time. And I really appreciate Squeegee, Evil Squeegee on Twitter for really defining that out in a great way. And I know I'm dropping him a lot of props, but I really appreciate the amount of time he does on Twitch with really just going through and talking it in general for any system. So this falls under that. And in the core rulebook is really the thing you're going to use. Now, I got mine covered up, but you can see it's a little thing saying core rulebook. And it is the Pathfinder core rulebook. And the dive that I'm going to take in there, it's back towards the appendix portion of the book, so it's really towards the very end in the appendices, and it falls in the appendices section from basically 554 on. It talks about special abilities, but after the ability scores, it goes into things like curses. Curses are fun. I really love them, and I think it's a condition when you're cursed that can really enhance players' thinking outside the box. Think about it. You got a curse that you have to remove from yourself. And you don't always have to make these conditions with an easy remove curse. It gets rid of it. You as the GM can set the tempo a little more difficult. And I know some of you mechanics GMs are going to go nuttier than a fruitcake when I say that. But you know what? You really have to adapt it to the story that you're trying to do. You don't want to make it so impossible they can never get out of it, but think about it. There are some curses in stories and movies we've seen that you need this component, you need this special item, and if you get all these things, then you can remove the curse that's been placed on you. Utilize that in your storyline. That is so much fun. What it does is it forces the characters to go after, and the players to go after, a solution that is out of the box. If all you use is a simple remove curse, then guess what? It's really easy. You have a cleric, you have a remove curse, you're done. Even with lycanthropy, things like lycanthropy. And a lot of players love that. Now, when you're infected by a lycanthropic disease, if you think about it, everybody's thinking, yay, I get to become a werewolf or a wereboar or a were-rat. It's not always yay, because what often is shown in storybooks and on TV and on movies is lycanthropy is not easily controlled by the person who's been newly infected. And that's true in Pathfinder. most of the ones, and I'll draw from the Carrion Crown, which is a perfect example. If you get bitten by a lycanthrope from one of those Adventure Pass modules, it is a hindrance. In fact, you could turn on your fellow characters. It will force you to do things. I love Being Human. Being Human's a great story where they show the one nurse on there, and he turns into a werewolf. He goes down in the basement with silver chains in a room that is a secure room for mental patients, and has himself locked in by his friend the vampire so that he will not harm anyone or bite anyone. And the only way he can control it is to make peace with himself and with his lycanthropic spirit. So it takes him on a journey that it wasn't a horrible thing, but it starts out kind of crazy. And even afterwards, he's still not sure if he's got it all under control. But he's better after he makes peace with that. You can do storylines like that. You can modify things. And ahead of time, you just say to the guys, look, this campaign I'm running for you, I'm going to take some liberties, and I'm going to change a little bit in the rules. And if you guys give me a little bit of rope or storyline to do this, I promise you will love the outcome at the end if you do things right. But give me that leeway to really adapt some things. And I think you're going to have some fun. I got a character, in fact, and this is a perfect thing for me to use with him. He says he's a cleric of Sarenrae, and his backstory leads into that his father was turned into a werewolf, or his actually stepfather, and he doesn't understand why he couldn't cure him with a normal curative. And see, I love that, because then it goes into the curse area, and you can have so much fun. But the curses they have is like a bestow curse trap. They have curses of ages, mummy rot, unluck, werewolf, lycanthropic. And then they go into other types of disease states. The next one's diseases. Diseases are fun, especially, a lot of areas of the world, and especially with the world of Golarion that they use in Pathfinder. There's a lot of ways you can get diseases, especially when you're in tropical environments or if you're on shipboard. If you think about it, early in sailor travels, Lyme disease was a major, major problem for sailors that they would get, and it would affect them. And the great thing about diseases is it affects stat scores on the player character. So it really kind of puts them into a more weakened, challenged state. So if you have players that are overpowered, that you feel are overpowered, and you're off in one of these areas, one of the ways of balancing is diseases. And the fun part about it for a GM, maybe not so much for the characters, is that diseases are transmitted by usually ticks, fleas, leeches, mosquitoes, sometimes the places you walk. So there's some very interesting diseases that can affect players. Poison. God, poison is the bane of every player. And even with the strong fortitude, you can still make it challenging with some of the poisons. And some of the more evil concoctions or the more refined, you can take the DC higher than what it says in the book. Because the more refined it is, the harder it is to battle. So just keep that in mind. Blindness. Oh, Lord. Blindness can be fun. If they don't have blind fighting, blindness gives negatives to attacks, movements, skill-based items, because you cannot see, and your other senses are not honed in like you would have with blind fighting. And so I look at blind fighting as somebody who, in a Shaolin monk, blindfolds themselves and uses those senses. Channeling resistance, charm, compulsion, all those things can be really an amazing thing to use against characters. Blinded, broken, confused, disabled, deafened, fascinated, fatigued. Players who go force marching or just continue adventuring eventually get fatigued, or sometimes the cold or the heat gives them fatigue. Grapples, incorporeal states, invisibility. There are so many modifiers that you can use and really enhance to limit or help the characters. And so please use those in there. Put them in traps. Put them in different things that will affect the players. So I just want to take a little bit of a dive into there on these states and say sometimes the challenges come from conditions over other things. And those conditions can really enhance your play. So don't be afraid to really look at that and get to know it. It's only a couple pages. And if you need to, print those out so you can use them and set apart ahead of time what kind of conditions can happen to the players during their play. And it also forces them to adapt their spells and potions and other items that they wouldn't normally take if you can utilize that, and makes it more challenging. Thanks, and have a great weekend of gaming.